We are now on the record. Hey everyone, I'm Julie Johnson. I'm the founder of Integrate Network. I'm an assistive technology specialist, or as I say, an inclusion and assistive technology specialist in the school system, and a yoga teacher.
I'm Natasha Babler. I am a universally designed integration specialist, social emotional inclusion specialist, and yoga teacher, as well as a special educator in general.
Yeah. So we've been working together in the school system and on Integrate for almost 6 or 7 years.
So I think it's close to 7. I think March will be 7.
Yeah. So anyway, we've been working from this lens of universal design for that whole time. So my background in assistive technology focuses on assistive technology because which is just using technology to help create spaces of access for anyone considered with a disability, right? And so and in my program I was in, which was from California State at Dominguez Hills, was through the rehab counseling program. So, and rehab counseling innately teaches universal design. So that's kind of how I kind of got into this kind of thinking, and that was back in 2009. So okay, we're gonna share screen, and everyone should have the slides, I think. Oh, I just lost all my share stuff. Oh well, whatever. Hold on, excuse all my tabs that are open. I'm gonna move this. Here we go. Okay. So intersectional belonging, AKA an introduction to universal design. And I just want to say from a marketing standpoint, we say intersectional belonging because at the end of the day, and it's universal design, but Natasha and I have been saying universal design for such a long time, but that we finally were like, well, what are we actually doing with universal design? It's creating spaces for individuals who usually are on the margins to come into the collective, right? And we do that by creating spaces geared and addressed and acknowledged towards their needs, right? That's innately how universal design, regardless of the space, that's how it works, is when you create a space to the most vulnerable person in your space, and that's up to you to decide who that is, right? Then everyone else benefits. And so it's innately drawn for intersectional belonging among all people.
Another thing to really keep in mind about universal design specifically is that for some reason, culturally, it has gotten linked to engineering and architecture and strictly physical access, when that's less than 1/10 of what universal design itself covers. So in order to get away from that, we have to use different language. Just like we have to direct the conversation in the world, we have to just direct the conversation linguistically. So if we want people to get past elevators and wheelchair ramps and into emotional inclusion and technological access, we have to move beyond the societal limitations of the word, the universal design.
Yeah. So, and I'll go through that in my next slide. However, hold on. Oh, there we go. You can read more about us here. Okay. So this is what I put on here, and I did send out an alt text PDF of this. So if you need it at all, feel free. And also, if you need also closed captions of this, we can do it. I can do it. It just might take about 24 to 48 hours before I can get them back. So just an FYI, I do have that in mind. It will not be to you for a couple of days if that's a need for you or someone you know that you want to watch this. Okay. A quick background on universal design. So Natasha, do you want to talk a little bit more about this? After I'll go through a couple of these, but I know this is like your area. This is how you've built your business. So I just want to make sure that you have this there. Do you want to start or do you want me to go?
Go for it, and okay. I will expound upon bits and pieces.
So universal design is an approach to space holding. And the language we use is geared more from universal design for learning, which is the educational and rehabilitation counseling background of it. And this is how I approach social justice and any organizational space that I Emmett, even virtually. So, or even how we create decisions or social media on Integrate. So universal design is an approach to space holding that minimizes barriers and maximizes engagement interaction among diverse groups in person or in virtual space. So universal design means activities that can be used and physically accessed by everyone. So again, I think the difference here is we're not meeting individual needs. What we're doing is we're creating opportunities for connection, for belonging, right? So individual needs are individual needs. This is more, how do we look at diverse groups and see how we can build a space of belonging by first identifying who the most vulnerable person is in the room and asking the right questions, which we're going to get to next, to support everyone's benefit, the collective, right? But that starts with meeting the needs of the most vulnerable in the room, which for many times, at least in the school system, it's students with that are adaptive populations. So, and design in this situation means knowing that everyone will benefit once we target the needs of the most vulnerable community or people in the room. For example, the captions on TV for humans with deaf or hard of hearing all supports people learning English and people in gyms, right? People in gyms probably didn't know that they needed to read while they were on the treadmill. But because closed captions, we were targeting vulnerable populations that wanted to watch TV, we just created something that benefited everyone. That's like a really, really good example, It's also flexible. So it could be flexible by the day, right? Like there are some days Natasha and I are working with our students in the school system and in the adaptive yoga and social emotional inclusion program. And there are some days where one student we target the most vulnerable in the room and everyone benefits. And then another day it's another person who's the most vulnerable, right? Depending on the need and what's happened to them, right? And that's what makes it innately trauma informed. The framework is then approached through inquiry, right? Because we don't know what's in your space. So it's a framework that's been adapted through the concept of inquiry. So has these topics that we cover and or categories of things we need to look at, and then we ask questions within those categories or topics. So when we ask impactful questions about the spaces we're in, we can find effective solutions. All right. That's it for me, Natasha.
Okay. So when you're thinking about universal design and the language in here is vulnerable populations, and if that word kind of makes you cringe a little, or it makes you, recognize that these are people who have something lesser or need something more, this term can kind of get into that gray, icky feeling area of special needs. And so maybe a way to think about this is, okay, so you have left-handed scissors and you have right-handed scissors, and then you have ambidextrous scissors. Universal design is ambidextrous scissors. It doesn't matter whether you're left-handed or right-handed, you can use the scissors. If a right-handed person gets handed lefty scissors, you're going to see them cutting backwards, right? Same with a lefty using right-handed scissors. I'm a lefty. I've been using right-handed scissors all my life and doing contortion things with my body as a result. But the ambidextrous scissors, the scissors that are sharpened in a way that it doesn't matter which hand you're using, they still cut. The function of the task gets done. And that's what universal design is for a world. So universal design in language, universal design in personal spaces, in physical spaces. Thinking of that wheelchair ramp as not just a wheelchair ramp, but a ramp in general. So you're trying to bring up an 80-pound box. Are you going to use the stairs or are you going to use the elevator? You're probably going to want to use the elevator. So that elevator is not just there for the one person who may be in the building who utilizes a wheelchair. Curb cuts, same thing. Yes, they benefit wheelchair users. They also benefit individuals pushing strollers. They also benefit people who just don't feel like stepping up a curb. Mm-hmm. So it's not even a vulnerability thing. It's also a choice. And when we present people with choices, we remain trauma sensitive, trauma informed, and just good human beings.
Mhm.
And in the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how we inform that choice so that people are actually able, they're choosing between the most relevant things, not choosing between lesser evils or choosing between things that are totally irrelevant.
Absolutely. So inquiry number one, what is the purpose of the space or gathering? What's our why? This is the first category of questions.
And in order to be able to find what's going to work for the most members of the people who need to engage with whatever the circumstance is, we have to understand the function of the circumstance. What do we want people to get out of this? What is the need for the use of this item? What is the demand for the use of this item? And where do those intersect?
Yeah, and I think it also goes back to again, not only what is the purpose of the space, and also I think a sub question to this is who is the most vulnerable community in the space for the day or the moment, right? That's always
where are the needs in the community and how do those best get mitigated?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the why, right? So that's the why. This is part, we're covering 3 of the inquiry today. And I think with the inquiry, it's also important to remember that this is also how we learn to build confidence in our decision making, right? Universal design is not meant to be a dictator, right? In your space. It's meant to build a sense of looking at a lens or worldview of how you look at people and look at diverse communities and make decisions that are best for everyone in this space, right? Starting with the most vulnerable humans. Okay. Inquiry 2, whose voice needs to be heard? This is representation. This is really important and like the next most important part as we move through scaffold up through into engagement.
Who is saying what is being said is as important as the words that are being said. The voice that is amplifying it is as important as the words, if not more important in some circumstances. And it's not just from a delivery perspective, but this also begins to influence accuracy and factualness. And so if somebody who's not a member of a population says that blind folks need, all blind folks need Braille, period, end of story, end of discussion, and a friend of mine who is functionally blind comes in who is not a Braille reader and is handed Braille and said, okay, you have access to this, course material now, have fun. And my friend goes, no, I don't. So universal design is having multiple modalities of information available. So this individual who can't read print and can't read Braille needs stuff in audio, whether that's a live reader or recording. And so having all 3 modalities of print, whether hard copy or electronic, audio and Braille available in a building for, like, say, a directory or something like that when they're going to a medical appointment is universal design.
Yeah, and I think this also, it also looks at when you are problem solving, like what Natasha and I have found in the school system is when you're problem solving, I know in social justice groups, lots of people say, the person that is the most marginalized, let's say, needs to be the one talking all the time. And that's not always true. Natasha and I can tell you about 5 times I've had to step in when Natasha's voice is muted, right? Or forward her emails forward, right? For people to make sure her voice is heard, amplifying. So that's where universal design is helpful too. Helps you discern whose voice is going to meet the problem, the solution, right? The why.
And so in those types of cases, it's still my voice, even though Julie is being an advocate for me. She is amplifying my voice, not speaking for me. She's saying, hey, folks, listen to this person. this is a need that you need to address.
Yeah. And it helps sparse up that nuance. That's one thing I really like about it, because there's not a lot of other frameworks I know that knows how to sparse and ask the right questions to get through that nuance, right? Because that's hard. And it's hard to find the brain space to address that, but it's not impossible. And that's what universal design is built for. It's built to address some of the most nuanced issues that, and build a little bit of help us build a little bit of confidence and discernment around our spaces, right? Okay. What is the culture of the space? Cultural and relational responsiveness. So I think when I talk about this, and when we talk about this in terms of universal design for space holding, we're talking about culture, like who like the culture of the people in the space, right? But also the relational culture, right? You can have people from all the same culture and there's still a relationship responsiveness, right? Relational responsiveness. So it's important to take note of what is the culture? What culture are you building? What is the culture around mental health support and cognitive supports? What's the relationship around, is ableism in the room? Is there an unspoken ableism in the room, right? In the space, things like that. Anything else on your end, Natasha? Nope.
Nope.
Okay, cool. All right. That was part 2 is coming up. So that was just how we were like building the foundation, right? Because it goes in order. It goes in purpose. What's the why? Who's the need? What's the need? Then we go in. Then we went into culture and what representation. Sorry, representation. Then culture, and then next is accessibility. Accessibility and inclusive communication options, and meaningful and impactful engagement. All right, so you can't have any of those without the others. They all scaffold on top of each other, right? You cannot have a meaningful communication options until you know who needs to be communicating. So that's where we're headed. Anything else?
Nope. I think we're
Nope.
good.
Awesome. Cool beans. Okay. Thanks everyone watching on the recording. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. All right. Stop. Okay. Cool beans.